Hey everyone, it's Matt here with Night Run Studio. Now, no matter how smooth and responsive your combat system feels, if there's no way to tell how much damage you're taking or dealing, it's always going to feel like something's missing. So, in this video, we're going to show how to create health and damage pop-ups. Now, this system is specially designed to work with our player progression mini-series. That said, it will plug and play into pretty much any health system you've got at all. Anyways, that's where we're headed in this video. Let's get started. Now, the very first thing we're going to do is actually create the pop-up prefab itself. So let's head over to our hierarchy where we can right-click and create a new UI canvas. We'll call this one Health Pop-Up. Now, if this is the first canvas you've created in your game, it will create an event system along with it, which we can just move up to the top here. That said, if you've been following in the player progression series, you'll want to delete it altogether, as we already have one in our bootstrap scene, and the two will conflict. All right, let's click on our canvas here. And over on the side, we're going to change its render mode to world space. With that done, we can head to our UI and add some Text Mesh Pro. Here I'm just going to put 2 digits, 99, which will give us an idea of how much space this is going to take up. And then over in our Rect Transform, I'm just going to make this box much smaller. We'll go with a width of 2 and a height of 1. Now at the moment that won't even fit our numbers as it's much too small, but because we're working in world space, we do want to make things a lot smaller. So first of all, let's come on down and make this look better. I'm going to use Bangers, which is the font I'm using for everything. And if, like me, you've been working the player progression system, you might want to use the black outline version. Here, we can just set this to red. It doesn't actually matter the color, it's our code's going to program this anyways. I'll then set mine to a much smaller size. I'm going to go with about 0.6, and then I'm just going to center this both vertically and horizontally within the box. At this point, we can just sort of take it and drag it over by our player so we can get a feel for just how large this is going to be in our actual scene. With that done, we've now set up our health pop-up, and we can actually just turn it into a prefab by dragging it down into our assets folder. We can then delete it from the hierarchy, as we'll be instantiating this through our code. Speaking of code, I'm just going to head into my player progression folder, though you can save this wherever you like. I'm going to create a new folder called add-ons. This is just going to be for sort of support scripts that are used in our player progression, but aren't necessarily part of the system itself. And then let's just create our script. I'll call this one Health Pop-Up. Now let's begin by getting rid of the start and update method, as we won't be needing either of those. That said, what we will need is a reference to our Text Mesh Pro so that we can change the number and color of our text. So this will be a TMP text reference, which we'll call pop-up text. Now, in order for our IDE to recognize that, we do need to add the namespace that we are using, TM Pro. Next, we'll just add some configuration details for the pop-up itself. We'll start with a private float, which will be the lifetime. I'm going to set mine at about 1.5 seconds. Next, we need to determine just how fast this text is going to float upwards after it spawns in. For this, we'll use a public float called speed, and I'll just set it at a speed of about 2 for now. We'll also need a private float for timer. This will be what actually counts down the time until it disappears. And we'll have another private color variable, which is just going to be called color. Okay, with that done, we can actually set this thing up. So this is a method that's going to be public, as it will be called when we instantiate this pop-up. And it will pass in an integer, which is just the amount that is either being damaged or healed. Here, we'll make sure that our pop-up text has its text set to the amount that's being passed in. That said, I don't want negative numbers showing up. I just want to show the number and have either green or red, depending on whether it's healing. We do need to convert this to string though, so that our text can read it. Now, what we want to do here next is just decide what color to use. So I'll say that if the amount happens to be less than 0, meaning it's damage, I want to set the color to the color red. If it's not below 0, then we'll set the color to the color green so that healing appears green. Now that we've determined what color we're going to use, we want to actually apply it to our text. We'll tell the pop-up text that its color will be equal to the color we just decided upon. With that done, we can actually get this thing moving and counting down its time. So we'll have a private void update method here. Here we'll just get the transform position of our pop-up, and we're just going to add to it a vector2.up. We'll just then multiply this by our speed, and then also by time.delta time. Now you'll notice I'm getting a red underline. That's just Rider warning me that this is an inefficient way to do our order of operations, since a vector is being multiplied multiple times. If we put this latter part in brackets, it will still get us the exact same numbers, but it'll only have to multiply a vector once, which just makes it a little more efficient. All right, with that math out of the way, I'm just gonna add some notes here. This first part is to make it move upward, and the next part is gonna handle our timer and fade logic. So first of all, we want to make sure that our timer is actually counting up. So here we'll add to it the delta time each frame. Next, we're going to keep track of our alpha and where it should be. So we'll make a float for alpha. Essentially, this will just be 1, which is fully opaque, but we're going to subtract from it the timer divided by lifetime. So for example, if the timer's at 1 and our lifetime is 2, that would be 0.5. So our alpha would also be 0.5, meaning half transparent and half opaque. So we'll evaluate that every frame, and at the same time, we're going to take our pop-up text's color, and here we're going to set it to a new color. We'll have its color for the RGB, red, green, and blue, stay exactly the same as it was at the beginning, as we're not changing color anymore at this point. However, the alpha we want to change, and here we'll just give it the value we just calculated on the previous line. That way, every frame it will become slightly more transparent. Then, at the bottom here, we'll just make sure that if our timer ever gets to be greater than or equal to its lifetime, then we want to destroy this pop-up. That's all there is to it. Now back in Unity, I'll just double click on our health pop-up prefab to load it in prefab mode. And here we can go ahead and add that health pop-up script onto here. It's just going to need to know where the text is that it's talking to, and then we can always adjust the lifetime and speed if we like. Now the only thing left to do before we can test this is actually make sure that the pop-up is being instantiated somewhere. We're going to do this in our health script. Now this should work just fine whether you've been following along with this series or have your own health script, as this part's pretty universal. First of all, up top here, we're going to make a header called popup, and we'll just make a reference to our prefab, a public game object called health popup. Then down below, you just need to locate the place in your script where health changes. So whether it's going up or down, we're going to want to make sure that we have a popup instantiated. So in this case, we'll just do a defensive check first of all. So if health popup does not equal null, so here we're going to instantiate it, but we're also going to store a reference to the popup itself. So I'll just get a general variable here called popup, and it's going to be equal to the result of this instantiation. In this case, we're instantiating the health popup. We're going to do it at the position of the object that has this script, so that'll be our enemy or player, and we don't want to rotate it at all, so we'll just put quaternion.identity. Now since we stored a reference to the popup, we can talk to it on the next line here, and we're just going to look on it for the component called health popup, and once we find it, we're going to call its setup method and pass along the amount of either damage or healing that we're doing. Now if we were to run our code exactly like this, we'd run into a problem where the character cannot die. That's because of this else if statement here. We want to make sure that that's just an if and that it's handled regardless of whether or not we've got a health pop-up or not. Now back in Unity, I'm just going to click on my enemy, find his health script, and make sure that we drag the health pop-up in there. I'm then also going to need to do the same thing for my player. And if you've been following this series, then your player is probably hanging out in your bootstrap scene. So we'll need to load that, find our player, go to his health script, and also drag in the prefab. Now this is going to kind of work, but all will not be well. First of all, it appears like nothing's happening when I run my scene. However, if I go into scene mode and zoom around, you can see that the text is in fact being instantiated. It's just way off in the corner here. That's just due to a simple mistake I made, and that's just that when we were setting up our health prefab, instead of moving the prefab itself to check its position, I moved the text. And on the text, we want to make sure that it's zeroed out directly on top of the health pop-up. While we're here, I'm actually going to zero out the pop-up itself, though that part won't matter too much as it's going to get instantiated with a different location anyways when we run the game. Now that will mostly fix the problem, except I'm not quite loving the way that this is looking at the moment, so we're going to want to customize it just a little bit. So there's a couple of small improvements that I'd recommend doing. The first, in our health prefab, is just to go to the canvas here, and I'm just going to click that we want to use override sorting and give it a sort order that's a little bit higher. That way it appears in front of the enemy, not behind him. The other thing I want to do is make it just a little larger. I feel like mine should maybe be more like about 0.8. Alright, with those changes when you get in the game now, we'll be having our pop-up. It's looking pretty good. It's appearing on top of the players, and it's working for both types of damage. Additionally, if I get a healing spell and cast that on myself, we've got a nice little healing pop-up. Alright, that's working nicely. I hope you found this one helpful. In the next video, we'll show how to set up a UI slider health bar for our character so that you can have yet another visual indicator of just how he's doing health-wise. After that, we'll show how to hook all these stats we've been creating up into our player's system so that anytime you change stats, it actually changes things like damage, spell power, and health. That said, we'll get there soon. Hope to see you in those videos. Until then, this is Matt with Nightrun Studio. Cheers.